So welcome everybody. We're going to be having a short session on fellowship application and how to navigate ERAS and everything which goes along with those activities in coming soon in July. So this is primarily for second years who are going to be applying for fellowship or any current third years who are going to be applying for fellowship. So if you've already matched or you're a third year who does not intend to apply for fellowship, you can come back at 3 p.m. for afternoon report. So let's dive straight in. Agenda, we're going to be talking about the timelines, how to navigate the ERAS CV, then letters of recommendation, personal statements, the ERAS checklist, and then some general interview tips and a short Q&A. So starting with the timelines, this is a snapshot of the ERAS timeline for last year. ERAS publishes a timeline of all the important dates. They haven't published the timeline for this year, but since it's a regular season, this is probably going to be similar to what you guys will also have. So what our timeline was when we applied last year was the season begins in June. So on the 9th of June, the ERAS season began. That means you can start getting your ERAS tokens from the AAMC website. And that token allows you to create your ERAS profile. And that is necessary for you to start uploading your CV, start uploading your documents. And my ERAS is similar to what you do for what you made for in residency. And it's the central process of your fellowship application. And then you can see in June, you can start uploading your profile, uploading documents. July was when you could start, July 7th was when you could start applying for fellowships. And then there's a 2-week gap between July 7th and 21st when you can apply and submit your application, but programs can't see your application yet. Programs started downloading applications on the 21st of July. Be very cognizant of the fact that this 21st of July, anything you submit between the 7th of July and the 21st of July is going to be timestamped as July 21st. So if you're, if you don't have any document, if you have a document pending, or if there's something you want to still work on, there is no benefit of applying on the 7th of July because the fellowship programs are still going to be seeing all of those applications with the same timestamp. Also, once you submitted your application, once you've pressed submit on My ERAS, you can't make any changes in your CV. So you can't make any changes in your publications, or you can't make any changes in your volunteer experience, research experience. The only thing you can make, only changes you can make between after the 21st of July, after you submit, are the personal information and your NRMP code. So make sure that your application is completely final proofread before you apply, and don't be in a hurry to apply on this as soon as it's possible. Try to wait and make sure that everything is done. And then that is followed by interview season. You generally get interviews depending on your specialty between you start getting them as soon as you apply, or some specialties tend to send invitations sooner rather than later. And interview days are generally between mid to end of August till sometimes up to the second week of October. Then in November, November is when you have your rank list deadline, and December 1st was the match day for us. It might be different for you guys. So for this cycle, the ERAS 2023 tokens will be available for purchase on the 9th of June 2022 through the AAMC website. So keep track of that. That's very important date. Make sure you get your tokens soon, and then you can start sending your letter writers the letter request and doing other things, but nothing can be done before the 9th of June. This is how the ERAS dashboard looks. This is my ERAS. This is a screenshot from my application. This is after it's been submitted. So this is the time I submitted. After this, you can't make any changes in your application. The only thing you can update is your personal information, and you can also keep track of all the documents. So yeah, once your token is activated, you may start filling out your ERAS application on the My ERAS website. You can generate letter requests through My ERAS itself. There's two options. You can have the website send the email to your to your letter writer through the website itself, or you can download a PDF and send it directly if you want to do so. The other thing is that when you're entering a letter for upload, you have to make sure that your letter writer's title is correct and it's appropriate. So if somebody just ask your letter writers if there's a particular title they would want to prefer. So if it's their administrative title, or if they have any position within the residency or fellowship leadership, they can have that specified in the letter itself. We'll talk about the ERAS CV and your regular CV itself in a separate section. As we said, once you click certify and submit, you will not be able to make any changes in your application. Personal information can be updated at any time, and you will be updating your NRMP code once NRMP code is available later. Also for IMGs, you can use your MSPE and transcript from the residency application cycle, since it's the same login for residency and fellowship. So your information from your residency cycle would have been saved in your MyERAS. So this is the NRMP timeline. So rank lists open on the 28th of September. This is the earliest you can submit your rank list. This is for programs. Programs will specify what is the number of spots they have. And then November 16th. This is for the current year. This is going to be your timeline. This is on the NRMP website. You can always go and check it out. And November 16th will be your rank order list certification deadline. And November 30th is the match day for the 2023 fellowship match. These are some important websites and resources. The ERAS website has a lot of information. It has Q&As, it has FAQs. You can also see, you can also download worksheets which help you keep track of your work list before you submit your application. So to upload other documents apart from the letter of recommendation, there are some other documents you need. Your photo, you need transcripts, USMU transcript, and your MSPE. So those are submitted not through MyERAS, but through the ERAS Fellowship Document Office. That's a separate website. It's linked with the MyERAS website. The MyERAS website has a link for it. You can press on it and then follow it to the EFDO website and start uploading your documents there as well. Do note that all the different documents have different processing times. So some documents require more time to process. Letters usually, if submitted early, require 5 to 7 working days, but towards closer to the deadline, they can take longer. So try to make sure that your letter writers have a deadline which is about 7 working days prior to what the actual deadline is, to make sure that you don't have anxiety at the end. It generally does take 7 working days, so do keep track of that. As I said, the ERAS website has applicant checklist and other resources which are very useful, and NRMP, which you wouldn't need in the beginning, but you'd probably need to pay attention to it towards the middle, towards when you started interviewing. Get your NRMP code and you have to update it into your MyERAS profile. So talking about your CV, so there's two types of CV you'll be needing for your fellowship application. The first thing you need is your generic CV. This is a standard format for clinical, academic, research careers. If you're applying for a job or for any other promotion in medicine, it has a generic format. During your fellowship application, you'll be needing a generic CV to forward to your letter writers, or if you have any mentors who will be reaching out to faculty in different programs, it's important to have a CV with the generic format. And this CV always follows a fixed convention, which that we can talk about later. And then there's the ERAS CV. This is generated from all of the sections you populate in MyERAS. So this is a very atypical CV, but this is what we've seen in residency as well. You enter the information in the different sections in MyERAS. It's not very wieldy. Depending on it, you can't control the order in which things appear, especially if they have the same time periods. So that's why not many people pay a lot of attention to it. This is most important during your interview for your interviewers to see what you've done and for your fellowship application. But if you're applying or if you're sending your CV for a letter writer, we recommend not sending the ERAS CV format. As I said, you cannot control the order for the experiences with the same date. So suppose there was a committee which you had for the second year of your residency, and there was another important task which you did for the second year of your residency, and you put in the same dates. You can't control which will appear first. These are examples of some generic CVs. You can see different people have different formats. You can also have separate headings, but we recommend the ACP AMA format, which is similar to the one here, but you can grab that from the ACP AMA websites. But just some general tips and do's and don'ts for CVs. So the point of the CV is to convey essential information concisely. So we recommend against having a really, really long CV, which makes it bloated without giving all the pertinent information. So one thing which a lot of people do is use incomplete sentences to present information concisely. While this is commonly done and it's very commonly seen on CVs, keep the structure of the shortening consistent throughout the document to make sure that it doesn't appear out of place. Make sure you have both at least the PDF and a Word format for your CV. Sometimes you need to make quick edits. There might be some submissions which just got accepted, so you want to make those edits on your Word document so that you can quickly edit it on the go. And always spell check and proofread. That's one of the cardinal sins of applying, is that you have a grammatical error or a spelling error in your CV or in your application. Always use a full legal name on your MyERAS application as well as CV. It allows the fellowship programs to verify the information by doing a Google search. Always make sure there's neat organization, clear headings. Even in your regular CV, make sure that the titles are clear, specific, and there's no overlap. It's a good idea to update your general CV frequently to reflect your career development. Suppose you're a third year, you worked on your CV for fellowship, but even after you've matched, it's good to keep updating it so that you have it handy, because in many times in your academic career you'll be needing to send people your CV, so you don't want to be doing it all from scratch. This is not true for the 7th point, is not true for your ERAS CV, because there's no way to make your name in bold, but in your generic CV you can enter your name in bold in the publications to make sure it stands out. And it goes without being said, be honest, never lie on your CV. Some things to keep in mind for CVs in the future, not just for fellowship, but never put in anticipated compensation. Try to avoid any gaps in education. You should always have your work experience and education in chronological order, and try to explain your gaps if possible. Never have any personal health information. We always recommend against putting your USMLE scores on your CV. Some things are usually, it's not the best to have any information prior to your med school in your CV. So anything from college or from high school, probably not the best to include that in your CV for fellowship. And always have the same consistent font and format when you are building your CV. So these are just examples. Always have your full legal name, address, and correct contact information. Especially during fellowship application, a lot of programs reach out to you to confirm some information. Sometimes you might receive phone calls after you've interviewed to talk about other things. It happened to me. I got a phone call from a program as well. So always make sure your contact information is up to date. You can use your personal email or Mount Sinai email. I personally use my personal email since it's better for programs to be able to reach you later as well. And sometimes you don't have access to VIP access or VPN. As we said, education needs to be in chronological order. Always, if you've done any fellowship or residency in your home country or had other experiences, you can mention those as well. And in your generic CV, you also should mention any other board certifications and licensure you might have. This is not really pertinent for us, but if suppose you had any academic research or clinical appointments previously, you can always put those. If you're going to be a chief resident, you can put that in your previous professional appointments as well. If you've served on any editorial boards or served as a guest editor, scientific reviewer for any journals, that's also something which can be mentioned. And there's a separate section in your ERAS CV for med school awards and any honors, including AOA. So there's in your ERAS CV, you'll have two major headings: work experience and volunteer experience. And then you'll have research experience. So it's usually very clear what you can put in research experience. You can put in any major projects you worked on. If you were part of any research committees, you can use those. But sometimes there's overlap between work experience and volunteer experience. So try not to have any overlap between the two. If you want to, generally what we recommend is if you have served on any committees which were voluntary, put them in voluntary experience. But for work experience, it would be your work. Either you've worked before your time as a resident, or you can specify your time in residency as your work experience. Or there'll also be sections in your CV where you can talk about the presentations, which can be local, national, international. Be sure to specify which ones were local, which ones were national and international. You'll also have a place to mention which city you presented in. You can also document your intramural presentations. That means any presentations you did as a part of your residency, morning reports, M&Ms, journal clubs, so senior lectures. Those can also be a part of your CV, especially if the case was something you presented was pertinent to your specific specialty. And then if you have any grants, those can also be specified. So publications. So this is talking about publications for a generic CV. So you always mention your publications in chronological order with the oldest first, and then you have to specify whether it's published, in press, submitted, or in preparation. You can always, even if you have a project you're working on and you haven't submitted it yet, you can type up, if you want to talk about it during our interview, you can say in preparation. And if you are documenting any book chapters, editorials, please make sure you identify in parentheses what it actually is and what's the specific book chapter number. So these are the headings you can see for your publications or abstracts in ERAS. So there'll be peer-reviewed journal article or abstract, journal article or abstract other than published, book chapters or poster presentations or oral presentations. These will be the headings to submit your scholarly work as a resident in MyERAS. So what we recommend is make sure there is no overlap. If some abstracts tend to be, or most abstracts tend to be published as a supplement, as we heard in the fellowship forum, if something is published as a supplement, it's very apparent to the interviewer that this is an abstract and not an original publication, not a full study. So if your publications are all supplements, that's seen as a red flag. So try to make sure that they're listed appropriately as abstracts rather than publications. If you're not sure whether a particular experience should come as a publication or an abstract, you can always talk to your research mentor, the senior author of the publication or of the abstract. You can talk to any advisors in your specialty or your program mentors, and us chiefs are always here if you like us to look at a draft of your CV. For your generic CV, there are lots of CV examples and templates available online. There's one on the AAMC website, which you can take a look at. And you can just Google ACP CV format, and one of the first hits is what the ACP recommends. I will now pass it on to.
Hey, everyone. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the letters of recommendation and how that's involved in all your fellowship applications. So if we can go to the next slide. Okay, so just talking about how many letters you can submit and like do's and don'ts, basically. So one important thing to know about the letters of recommendation is that not every program is going to request you the same amount of letters. So if it's a program that you're particularly interested in, or just in general, it's good advice to actually just read the application requirements in detail and make sure that you are submitting exactly what they're asking. So basically, do not submit a letter of recommendation outside of the specified date, and also do not submit like more or less letters than they request. At least that's what's advised, just because it indicates that you're actually interested in the program, you're reading their instructions, and you're actually capable of following these basic instructions. And well, there is a thought that maybe like if you submit more, like you're trying to overcompensate for another potential weakness that you may have in your application. So if we can go to the next slide, we're gonna talk a little bit about just how it's gonna look like for you. There's one program letter, so it's gonna be listed, and I'm gonna show you a little bit further in advance just how exactly it's gonna show up in your ERAS, but you're gonna get one leadership letter, meaning one program director or an APD. It's not necessarily written by Dr. Andrilli, despite the fact that it says program director. It's written by our program leadership. It can be an associate program, one of our associate program directors as well. And then usually you're gonna submit 2 to 3 other letters as well. And usually, or I guess classically, they've required 3 letters total, including the PD letter. However, and we heard about it in the fellowship forum, that's actually recorded and uploaded into Teams in case you were unable to attend. The directors mentioned that now it's becoming more and more common to have 4 letters in total, including the PD letter. So we can go to the next slide. This is just an example of how the programs you are applying to may have the instructions of what they require for you to apply. So here you can actually see, and we're going to highlight, but basically it asks you for 3 letters of reference, including one from your residency program director. So that means you're going to submit the leadership letter plus an additional 2 letters of recommendation on top of that. If we can go to the next slide, I think it's going to highlight it. And if we can move to the next slide. Thanks. And so here it's the same thing. We just want to highlight, this is another example, and what I was telling you, it's becoming more and more common here. As you can see, it says 4 letters of recommendation, and then at the bottom, it says program director's letter of recommendation. So here, what they mean is like 4 letters total. It means your leadership or program director letter plus an additional 3 letters of recommendation on top of that. And this is going to vary from program to program. So just make sure that when you're applying, you read the fine print. So again, I think it's going to highlight, and if we could go to the next slide after that. This is an example of how it's going to show up to you once you're uploading the letter. So you're going to go to the letters of recommendation section on ERAS, and then you see the button there that where you just click on add new. And then if we can go to the next slide. You're going to see this is an example. For example, if you're applying to a room and you're asking Dr. Ali for a letter, you have to make sure like you're going to be the one inputting in this case Dr. Ali's name and his title or department. Here it's Chief of Division of Rheumatology, and be sure to specify the specialty to which the letter will be assigned. This means that it is not the specialty to which the letter writer belongs, or their own specialty. It's the specialty that you're applying to. So even if you wanted to ask Dr. Ali for a letter of recommendation, but you were applying to a different specialty, he just knows you really well, or you worked on a research project, then you would still write down the specialty that you are applying to, even though Dr. Ali is in rheumatology. And at the bottom, you also see this is where you're going to distinguish between, is a letter writer, your program director or APD. This is about the, leadership letter that I was talking about. If that is the program's letter, then that's where it's going to be written or checked. And if it's, a department chair of the specialty that they belong to, then you're going to select it as well. And if not, then you just click none of the above. Of course, then at the bottom you have, waive my rights to view my letter of recommendation. This is generally, strongly recommended that you do waive the right to read the letter of recommendation, just because that means that you are not going to be able to read it, meaning that the letter writer is going to be able to submit a much more honest letter of recommendation. And if we can go to the next slide, you'll see an example. Just like I said, in my case, Dr. Fergolini did me the great favor of writing my program letter of recommendation. And as you can see, it's not, despite saying PD, it's not Dr. Andrilli. It can be an APD as well. And you can see that, I mean, I applied to hematology oncology, so not all my letter writers were from Hem-Onc, but you can see that all of them were labeled as hematology oncology because that is the specialty that I was applying to. So if we can go to the next slide. So just general tips about who will write your letters of recommendation. Of course, you want you want someone that is going to write you a good letter of recommendation, right? So one way to go about it is you can ask like either Dr. A or like Jose, or check on new innovations, like which evaluations did you get, who gave you a good evaluation, and you can then go and ask that person if you received a particularly good feedback. It might be a good idea to ask them for a good letter of recommendation. But in general, one of the most important things is that you ask someone that knows you well and that can really describe your abilities and potential. You don't want like, a cookie cutter letter of recommendation. You want someone that knows you like really well. If you have a research mentor, for example, it might be a good letter, but just remember that that's why it mentions like highlighting your abilities and potential. This is the space where the program is going to get to know you a little bit better through the eyes of or the perspective of your your attendings and people you've worked with. So you want them to showcase different abilities. I would recommend not asking, if you've been heavily involved in research, for example, don't ask everyone like about like, don't ask only like your research mentors, and don't highlight, don't avoid highlighting your clinical abilities or potential. Try to get, varied letters of recommendation. And you can also ask them actually, when you ask them about like writing a letter of recommendation, you can ask them, what you would want them to highlight about your abilities and your experience working with them. Now, this is something that was also mentioned in the fellowship forum. If possible, if it's possible, you should try to include one letter writer at least from the specialty that you are applying to. It just shows interest. It shows that you work well in that field. However, I would emphasize point number 2 over point number 3. Don't ask someone from the specialty just because it's from like the specialty that you are applying to. Again, it's better to get a letter from someone that knows you well. And from the fellowship forum, if you didn't have time to join, we got a few tips. Some of the directors were saying, if it's possible when you're rotating through the consult service, like offer to present a topic, a case. Another director mentioned, try to keep a list of interesting cases of patients that you've seen with that attending, so that way when you are asking for that letter of recommendation, it's not going to be it's going to be a little bit more personalized, and it's in general going to likely be a better letter of recommendation. So try to include those experiences. Like I mentioned before, you can highlight if it's the section chief or medicine chair that is writing you a letter, that may carry a little bit more weight. But again, stressing the fact that the letter writer has to know you like really well. So don't ask someone just because they're the section chief or just because they're the specialty you're applying to. It's preferable to get a letter from someone that knows you really well. And again, when you're asking for the letter, just be very clear and direct. Here's an example, Dr. Brown, like, do you think you could write me a very supportive letter of recommendation for like the position I am applying to next year for whatever specialty? And you want to emphasize that, right? You want to, they might say, I don't think we've worked together long enough, or could you send me like a list of cases like that we work together, or something like that. But just you want to make it clear that you kind of like, that you want a good letter of recommendation. You are asking them if they think that they would be able to write a good letter of recommendation for you, given the past experiences. So if we could go to the next slide. And these are just general tips for a good letter of recommendation. So you want to give your letter writers enough time to write a good letter, and keeping in mind what Angad mentioned, that once you upload the letter of recommendation, it also takes some time to process. So you really want to be early and like give them time. Attendings are very busy. They might be, you can't control, they might be on floors like for the month right before the application time. So keep all these things in mind. Give them at least, 3 to 4 weeks notice so that they can write the letter. Make sure that they are aware of the deadline as to when's the last day that they can upload their letter. And most of the attendings are likely going to ask you to provide them with a CV or even a personal statement. And this is, again, going to help them write you a good letter of recommendation. They're going to try to personalize it. But then again, ask them which specific attributes you want them to highlight in their letter of recommendation, because you don't want this to just be a rehash of your CV. And very importantly, follow up with your letter writers during match day. It's easy to, get lost in the moment. You either match and you're accelerated. Hopefully that's the case for everyone. But regardless of the situation, emotions are high and it's easy to forget to follow up with all your letter writers. It's not an easy thing to do. They invested time, they care about your future, and they're probably wondering how you did. So don't forget to just shoot them an email, a text, or something about just how you did, because they're going to be invested in your case. I think that's it. If we can go to the next slide. Yes, so now we're going to talk a little bit about personal statements. I think Sunny is going to take over this section.
Thank you, Rafa. Yes, let's chat about personal statements. If you want to go to the next slide, you'll see that the ACP asked residency program directors just how important a personal statement is. And these are some of their responses. And you can see that we highlighted, their interesting comments, right? They say, well, grab him by the throat, make him pay attention, personal statement may impress a few people, but puts off most. Another program director said, a good personal statement should tell the reader something that you cannot see in their CV. The third one said, well, it's fine if you can't be like exciting and original. They don't really think this is necessary. What they all have in common is that they would like to see attention to detail in a personal statement. So you'll see that throughout, the program directors, and you can find this at acponline.org. Throughout all their comments, what they feel is most important is to have, proper grammar and just make sure that you're not making any errors there. If you go to the next slide, when we wrote our residency personal statements, our main goals were basically to say, well, I'm a reliable medical student, I'm a clear thinker, and I'll be low maintenance. Please pick me, right? Our fellowship personal statement will be less centered on, that path that came before your residency, and more on specific experiences that you had during residency. Your main goals for your personal statement will basically be, tell someone why you're interested in a particular specialty, what you've done during residency, and sometimes even before residency to prepare for that specialty, and of course, why you're interested in following this career pathway. So we'll review the anatomy if you go to the next slide, the anatomy of a personal statement. But what you need to keep in mind is that, this is an introduction to your story. Whoever's reading this will see your vocational biography rather than your personal biography. You will describe your interests, your skills, what motivates you, what your goals are in life and for your academic career. And of course, you want to clarify how, all these experiences that you've had in the past, whether it's before residency or during residency mostly, have sort of prepared you to, be an adequate candidate for that career choice that you've made in that particular field that you're interested in. Now, if we'll go to the next slide, your personal statement should not be, like I said, a personal biography. Like really, it was great for a residency personal statement. So people and program directors are less interested in knowing about your childhood, your hobbies, like your family and how you grew up. You're sort of already here, right? You don't want to make this a resume of your accomplishments. You have a CV for this. It's more of, why these accomplishments make you a good candidate, how these have led to your professional development. And when you focus on these accomplishments, it's more like, well, this is what I've done, and this is sort of how these experiences have led to where I am and how I can be a good candidate. But you can't really focus on how you're a better candidate than other people. This is not what your personal statement is about. You'll let them decide. Your program director will read your CV and they'll make that choice. So let's look at the structure of our personal statement. If you go to the next slide, basically you want to limit this personal statement to 1 page if that's possible. And I think for the majority of us, it'll probably be possible to limit this around a 500 word limit. Now, the structure is reflecting those goals that we spoke about before, right? And the majority of personal statements will follow the same sort of outline. You'll start with paragraph 1 with an introduction, right? This is why you're interested in the specialty. You can throw in a little anecdote, something personal, but make it brief. Like we said before, this is not a personal biography. It's important that you mention just how interested you are in the human aspect of medicine, right? How you're interested in patients. Maybe not so much research. We'll have other areas where you can focus on this. And here, like we said, you can include any personal narratives that may not be obvious in your CV. Like, well, I traveled across the world, doing this and that volunteer work, or, I traveled here for residency. I've participated in, so many whatever committees, and, this is how I've contributed to diversity in my residency program. It's really good to talk about, your experiences, what's shaped you in life, but try to avoid any controversial topics. And this is something that we've seen in all the reviews about preparing a personal statement, right? We don't want to be overly dramatic. Don't talk about religion. Don't talk about politics. It's better that your personal statement remains a little, like flying under their radar than just grabbing the wrong kind of attention, right? The negative attention. So I wouldn't take any risks with this narrative and just keep it cryptic. If we go to the next slide, the second paragraph may focus on your clinical experience. So again, why did I make this decision, and what were those clinical experiences during residency that helped me just kind of affirm that this is my future career pathway? And of course, you may put in something like, leadership experience, whoever has been part of any specific tracks during residency, if you volunteered for anything, or if you're part of any committees. Your second paragraph is a good place to put this. And if you did something relevant for residency during your medical school, that could also go in there. Although I would limit, the pre-residency stories during your fellowship personal statement. Now, your third paragraph will be more about your research and your scholarly activity, right? And this is sort of reflected in your CV as well. So how do you focus this? Again, how did this influence my career path? Whatever scholarly activities and research you've done. And then again, if you have anything relevant before medical school, whoever's worked, on research before coming to residency, and it's something relevant to your fellowship program. What you have to say is, like, this is what I'm interested in, but I've had this, doubt before, like, what if I'm not really into research, or I haven't done much of, like publications or scholarly activity, like, how can I say this? And I think this is really dependent on the subspecialty program that you're going to. Some programs you'll see you'll have like, clinician educator tracks, or they'll be purely clinical and less focus on research. But the main thing is that you want to make sure that you state that, these are not your goals. And if you're unsure of how to say this, your mentor is a good person to go to before you write up your personal statement, and just make sure that, you remain a competitive candidate, in any of these fellowship programs. without really giving up on what your true goals are. Because throughout your, application experience, the main thing is that you're picking whatever program is best for you. Not so much you becoming what the program wants. If you go to the next slide, the paragraph 4 is more about your career plans, right? So what do you see yourself doing in the future? Again, whether it's research, you're an educator, you're a peer clinician, it's okay if you don't know at this point, right? You want to know that whatever you say in your narrative, just kind of stick to the same line. It's okay. They're not gonna, things may change and they're not gonna hold you accountable for whatever you said in your personal statement, because we don't know how, our career is gonna go, what the future is gonna have for us. The one thing that I would say is, again, as you're keeping consistent with this, think about what you want for your future career. Think about what you're interested in. This would be a good time, even if you haven't thought, what your fellowship is going to look like, to make a decision sort of, like a short term, what you want for yourself. Now, if you move to the next slide, we have a few do's and don'ts. So just don't be a little like cliche, don't be general. We're not just saying just how skillful we are, and just making general remarks. You want to connect your thoughts, and if you go to your next slide, you want to be able to connect your thoughts, your passions with very concrete examples. And this is going to be key. You have a lot of experiences through your residency, so don't try to be vague. It's death is better than breath. You see here, pick 1 or 2 maybe concrete examples on, like how your patients influence you. Make it human. There's people that have affected our commitment to a particular career path. Think about them. Think about anecdotes that, you may consider relevant. And again, this is more of you being active about it, and we'll talk about it in the next few slides. You can show your leadership skills through examples. You can show how you solve problems. And I'm sure we've all had some sort of experience, whether it's with patients or with residents. You'll see this will also come up in your interviews. They'll want to ask these questions. In the next slide, there are certain things that you can say in your personal statement that you really don't have any space to say anywhere else. What the personal statement can really do for you is sort of let programs know why you're interested in a specialty, what you want to accomplish for your career, but at the same time, you want to be able to explain any lapses that you've had in training, any unusual circumstances. It's best if you address them like outright. But again, like with anything else, if you're unsure how to say this and not sure how to word it, you can ask your mentor, because they have some experience reviewing personal statements and evaluating them as well. You can highlight major items in your curriculum that may have gone unseen, like community involvements and many other projects that you've enjoyed, as well as live experiences that you didn't get a chance to highlight there. You want to go to the next slide. So again, this is what you're sort of doing. You're telling a program director, what potential questions they may have for you during your interview. You break the ice. You're showing them who you are, why they should consider you above other candidates, and again, setting you aside like for the work that you've done, or whatever experiences you think might have led you to pursue this particular fellowship. Now, if you go to the next slide, what we would like to do here again is use an active voice. You want to use action verbs. So for example, we have an example here but if you say, well, like directing a residency program at this major like cancer center would be nice, as a career pathway. It does sound different to say that versus, I hope to direct someday a residency program at this like major academic center or cancer center, whichever place, right? You want to make sure you sound active here. have a flow throughout the page. Make sure that you're keeping the same line. You're not changing your mind about what you're saying. Stick to your point. We have 4 different paragraphs, and you can go back to this presentation if you want to review this, or you want to say specific things. We'll see an example later. And take your time. And this is usually, a question that we make and that we get at times as well. When should I start this? And I think this is around the time where you should start writing your personal statement and maybe have it ready by, early May, because your personal statement will help your letter writers when they want to really, they want to insult you, they want to make sure that you look great and that your experiences are highlighted. If you want to go to the next slide, some very more specific tips for when you're ready to start writing your personal statement. Make it short when you're talking about your fellowship program. Like they know you're interested in that, and hopefully that's where you're applying to that specific specialty. So maybe a line or two just saying why you like, in my case, endocrinology. And if you have a story that's special, then you can use that. But if it's nothing unique, it's like, oh yeah, I like teaching, diabetes education to my patients, then probably just move on and don't include that. If you go into the next slide, don't use any generic phrases. Again, don't talk about other specialties. Maybe this is something that could come up during your interviews if you've done any research that may be confusing. You had a specific interest when you started. That's maybe when you want to just affirm that this is a specialty for you, but don't do it in your personal statement. And don't try to tell them everything about yourself. Just pick a couple points, right? Let your curriculum sort of highlight the rest of your work, and those points that were not highlighted there, then use your personal statement for that. Like I said before, if you go to the next slide, don't be someone you're not. Research, again, this is your goal and you're trying to find the right program for you, and they're gonna need to know this when they're interviewing you, and a personal statement is a way to do this. So try to stay, true to yourself. Don't fabricate, don't inflate. People know, they've read this a million times, million personal statements, and it will show during your interview day as well. If you go to the next slide, 1 page would be your limit, and that's ideally what you're going to try to go for. And then there's the question of how to really upload this to Eras, because they won't let you upload a Word document. And there have been cases where there's some errors as you copy and paste from a Word document into Eras. So this is a good tip to keep. Just try to use a copy editor, just use Notepad, and then go from there with your personal statement into Eras, just to avoid any weird characters. One of the main things is have at least a couple people, your mentor, have a set of eyes on your personal statement before you submit. Don't make any grammatical errors. That says a lot about you, and it does make you look sloppy. If English, in my case, it's not your first language, then have someone, at least 2 people, proofread it so that you're not making any mistakes there. And then, of course, major thing, don't forget to assign it to all of the programs that you're applying. If you go to the next slide, I'm just going to reinforce this: proofread, revise, and then proofread again. Preferably someone that knows you, someone that knows just sort of the outline that you're trying to go for, your faculty mentor. More than 1 person should read it. We all have different styles, so you may want to pick 2 different people with different styles for that. Don't repeat yourself. I know I am repeating myself at this time, but this is really important to say, and it's your own. So even if they make any corrections to what you want to say, keep that in mind, but really make it your own, because this is the way that the program directors will get to know you before they even decide if they want to interview you. And again, I'm going to show you a brief example in the next slide. Oh, sorry about that. What I said, in the end, what you were going for is, I'd like to meet this person. And then you just knock their socks off in the interview. Now let's go to the next slide. And just briefly, and you'll have this everywhere online. You can read in the first line, this person gave a brief, biographical introduction. The second line or second paragraph, they're sort of talking about, their residency experience, or giving like very specific examples. In the third paragraph, like we said before, they're highlighting something that they couldn't really do in their CV, accomplishments. And then in the last line, you'll see they really summarize, they talk about how, they like patients, they're not overly dramatic about this. They talk about the honor of being like a chief president in this case, whatever highlights they wanted to make. And then they just conclude with, my future goal is, because that's going to be really important, again, for your program director to know like where this person stands in the future and what they want to come to the scholarship program. And then we're gonna move on to the ARIS application portion with Jackie.
Thank you. So we just have a few more slides left, guys. I'm hopefully not taking up too much more of your time. But this is just going through the logistics of putting together your ERAS application and kind of all the bits that need to go into that. So next slide. ERAS, if you look, they have a checklist, which is quite useful to kind of look at all the documents that you need, or the documents you need to think about getting ahead of when the token becomes available. And they also have a frequently asked questions, which isn't updated right now, but it is really useful because they'll put together the timeline there, and they'll also put together the fees and costs associated with number of programs and things like that that you're applying to. So next, once you have your AAMC account and you get your ERAS token, whatever that is, the 9th or 10th of June, when you open your account, this is what it looks like then. So the home screen or dashboard, you'll have your application section with all your personal information, CV information, your documents with all your documents you've uploaded, and you can also start looking at programs, saving programs, and obviously eventually applying to programs. So next, this is what the application section looks like. So you'll put in your personal biographic information. If you're an IMG, you'll also put in your visa status here. So if you're a JH visa, and there's also a place for you to put in your NRMP number. Obviously, you won't have this now at that time. You'll have it in August. But like Angat said, you can update the personal information later. Once you certify and submit, that's the only thing you can update, right? You can't change your CV or anything after certify and submit, but you can put in your NRMP number after. So ERAS is like where you upload everything, you apply for the programs, and then the NRMP is where you apply to match and rank to match. So next, this again is just highlighting that you won't actually get an NRMP number until August. So it's a good idea to stick in your calendar the date that you can get your ERAS token and the date that you need to apply to the NRMP as well, to get an NRMP number to make sure you're included in the match. And next, going through the application section. So obviously putting in the biographic information is pretty straightforward. And then like Angat had mentioned, the CV information, you put it in, it's like different boxes, like residency, you put it in, it's not a document you upload. But it is good to start putting together now your types of experiences so that it's easy to just transcribe that when the time comes. Definitely the most labor intensive part is putting in your types of experiences. So research experience is one. So you list any projects you were involved, either during med school, during residency. It's a good idea maybe to have like a structure for that as well, because it's just a box where you populate it. So for mine, I would have project title and list that, description, and just describe what maybe the study was, responsibility, so describing your involvement. I wouldn't like inflate or overestimate what you did, because sometimes they can ask you about it and grill you on it, but just describing your involvement in that, and then the status of that, if it was like submitted at a conference, if it's published, if you're putting together the manuscript, just to give them an idea of where the project is. Work might not be applicable, but say if you did residency and intern year before that, to definitely list that, or if you had a job before residency, before medical school. Volunteer experience, it's always tricky to maybe know exactly what to put in here. It's not like super essential like residency, but if you were involved in any committees during med school residency, definitely list that. If you did things like volunteer to administer COVID vaccinations, that would go in here as well. There's also a thing at the bottom. It always asks you your reason for leaving, any experience that you mention. You don't really need to list a reason. I think it's just there, say if you left a job early and you're kind of trying to explain the reason behind that, that you fill that in, but you can leave it blank otherwise. And next is going through the publications. So after you fill in your types of experiences, you'll list your publications, and you're listing them almost like citations. So any oral presentations, poster presentations, abstracts that you have, you'll list them all in that format, and they'll also have you kind of list it or describe it like a citation. So any manuscripts that maybe you started to write, you don't necessarily list these here, right? You would list them in your research experience, but you would only list manuscripts here that you have submitted or that are in progress. And the next couple of slides are just to give you an idea of the layout of the documents that you need. So you'll put up your personal statements, your letters go up here as well, but the other documents that you need, these are them. So the only one, the AB side, I think it's like for surgery, it's not something you need to worry about at all, but the other ones are ones for us to upload. So if you go to the next slide, so you'll use this link at the bottom, and you can upload most of these things here yourself. So if we go to the next slide, and it'll show you a pop-up of what that looks like. So once you click on that, you can upload your photograph yourself. So when you click on the photograph, it will tell you the criteria you need, like, you know, the dimensions and what kind of photograph to upload. You can upload your MSPE yourself or your transcript yourself if you have those. And you use this here. It usually takes a day or so for them to process these things. And next, the MSPE and transcript, there's two ways you can upload it. You can use the ERAS means, where they basically send a request to your medical school for your medical school to upload it directly. Or if you have it yourself, you can upload it directly yourself. So we kind of all did different things. I had mine physically with me from my medical school, from residency, so I uploaded it directly. But it's also very straightforward for your med school to upload it. You just need to make sure to reach out to your medical school ahead of time in case they might not be the most responsive. And next, the USMLE transcript is something everyone needs to upload. Well, you don't actually upload it. You click a box, which you're basically allowing ERAS to get the USMLE transcripts released, and you do need to pay $80 processing fee to do this. So it's just where you see the USMLE transcripts, you'll click on that, and you're authorizing release of that, and you pay your $80. And then the photograph is to be uploaded. It's not something you need to like necessarily get like professionally shot, but obviously it needs to be a professional looking photo, you know, smart dress, business suit or clinic appropriate, professional clothing. And if it's applicable to you, obviously NRMP has further information on couples matching, which can be useful. If you're obviously not applying to the same fellowship, it's useful to reach out to program directors and have them kind of coordinate as well among themselves to help with that. And some of the main advice that we have, I think we've kind of said it a lot, definitely started early, especially things like personal statement, reaching out to your letter writers, starting to put together your CV thing. It is labor intensive, and also you don't know if you're going to be on a busy rotation by the time like deadlines roll around. So you kind of want as much of it ready to go so you don't have those stresses to deal with really at that time. And like I said, mark the dates in your calendar with when you can get your ERAS token and your NRMP login as well. And the last thing that I have is just on interviews. I don't think there's any real consensus on in-person or virtual. Might continue virtual. So once you've kind of done the ERAS NRMP side of things, obviously then you start looking towards setting yourself up for interviews. The fellowship forum had lots of information, but I guess the kind of things that I kind of definitely remember is kind of spending time even looking at your background. Obviously you don't want a white background like hostage situation looking appearance for your interviews. Definitely worth investing in a camera or even a light. It's not that expensive, but sometimes the cameras on your laptops aren't great. And different programs can use different softwares. Not everyone uses Zoom, so make sure you kind of pay attention to that and download it ahead of time as needed. Dress smart, like business, clinic appropriate clothes as well. Make sure to arrive early, even if it is virtual. And what happened to me is my Zoom tried to like reconfigure, re-download just before I was about to log into like one of my very important interviews. So still giving yourself like cushion time, even though it is virtual. And there's lots of resources online looking up common interview questions and preparing answers, practicing with people, practicing with your friends, being nice to everyone that you meet along the way. You'll meet like coordinators, administrators, fellows, PDs, being like engaged, keeping away from your phone, keeping away from distractions, and things like that. But the other thing is the fellowship forum was very useful from like the program directors' perspectives, what they look for as well. So Carlos is asking, our program letter written by our mentor advisor, can I ask an APD that is not my mentor for a letter that would be considered as my program letter? So I think usually they kind of divvy them up among themselves. So say Dr. Varghese, I worked in Chelsea, she wrote my letter. But if there's an APD that you have like, you have a connection with, Phil would write you a better letter. I think you can reach out to them as well. But again, like all letters, reaching out to them ahead of time and making it clear if it's your program letter that you want, not like another LOR.
Jackie, I can answer that. The APD that you're assigned to writes the program letter. Let's say that I've gotten other people asking me for letters, but I'm not their advisor. So I would write a letter recommendation. So the understanding would be that Dr. Prigolini would be writing your program letter. And if I write a letter, any other APD writes a letter, or Dr. Andrelli writes a letter, that would be a letter recommendation. So we have an understanding.
And do people need to reach out to figure out who their program letter writer is, or that's all decided already?
That should be, you should have an assigned advisor. I think the people who don't have an APD or a PD, those are the people that we will make sure that it gets assigned. And that's something that Dr. Andrelli and Nancy kind of take care of, but with us, but just know that emails go out and we have like an Excel of all the people who are applying for fellowship and which programs, and our names are attached to it. So whoever is the name is attached to, that's the program letter. So we know that Dr. Prigolini is going to be writing the program letter. And so if I get asked later, I know I'm going to be writing the letter recommendation because Dr. Prigolini's name is under that person's name. And that's something that we kind of worked out. But if there's any confusion, just reach out to, really the chiefs, and they can go by with Dr. Andrelli. But it should be that most of you guys have an APD assigned with you, if not Dr. Andrelli.
We don't have any more questions. We can take a short break and then come back in about 4 minutes.